Every year in the springtime, I drive to California's Capay Valley. It's a small valley in western Yolo County. If I time it right, I'll see the fruit and nut orchards in bloom. Along the way, I may see a kid or two, the four-legged kind. Running through Capay Valley is Cache Creek. Cache as in the bounty of the Hudson Bay fur trappers, not cash as in someone scored a bundle at the casino. I go there for leisure, not work, and some years ago I inherited 2 dogs, so I take them along too, and generally we enjoy ourselves. But there is always one thing about Cache Creek that, as the Irish might say, disturbs my rest. Some years ago, a 40-year-old Sacramento man drowned in Cache Creek. And the thing is, they were never able to retrieve the man's body. Now, I did not know this man who drowned in Cache Creek. I don't know his wife nor his son who was with him that day. To me, this was a mystery and a story about a creek I visit every year. To his family, it was a life and a loss, and maybe they were done telling the story, so I didn't try to find them to ask what happened. But after standing beside the creek over many years and wondering what happened, I decided to seek out some answers. The first thing I needed to know was more about the creek. The creek I visited appeared mostly ankle or knee deep, too shallow to float inner tubes or rafts. Cache Creek drains from Clear Lake and passes through a dam. A North Fork Cache Creek joins the main stem Cache Creek just downstream from the Bureau of Land Management's Redbud parking area just off Highway 20. From documents I read online, I learned that releases through the dam are controlled primarily for delivery of irrigation water to the Capay Valley and beyond. These summer irrigation flows result in a Cache Creek that is deep and swift. Because I always visited in springtime, I never saw these deep, swift flows. Next, I read about recreational rafting on the creek, Class 3, Class 2 rapids. There were known and named riffles and rapids, but there were no warnings or cautions about any of these. These are the kinds of rapids people play in, and only if something has gone terribly wrong do they drown. So what happened? Finally, I found archived news accounts, along with a description of how poles and grappling hooks were used to try to retrieve the body of James Robert, was this sobering photograph. In this unrunnable section of creek, his body had become trapped under the boulders and was held there by the force of the water. But how did he end up in a section of the creek others had safely avoided? I went looking for the boulders. It wasn't long before I found them. After looking over the maps, I decided to hike to the boulders, and using only best guesses, I would retrace the steps the man, James Robert, took with his son that day. Was this kiosk yet to be built the day the father and son arrived? I don't know, but look at this topographic map. Here's where the boulders are. Here's that same area on the kiosk map. Finally then, here is a current enlargement of that topo map I found elsewhere. Had he seen this map at the kiosk or elsewhere, would the outcome have been different? I was there in March. They were there in early June. The grass would have been dry then, air temperatures perhaps in the 90s. They were carrying inner tubes up a steep, hot trail. At the end of their hike, the water of the creek would cool them, refresh them. My guess is this: the car was left at the Redbud parking area. They carried the 13-year-old boy's life jacket. They planned to hike to the main stream of Cache Creek, float to where the North Fork joined, then hike back to their car, a nice circle. Let me emphasize that this is only a guess, but it would explain what happened that day. Reaching the top of the ridge, here he made the fatal mistake. Had they walked left, descended the ridge, and put in their inner tubes there, they'd have been downstream from the boulders. But they looked right, perhaps seeing this welcoming stretch of water. To put in farther upstream would mean more float time, more time on the water. They descended the ridge upstream of the boulders. Look again at these specially trained cadaver canine workers. Notice the man on the left is standing atop a boulder that resembles a sedan. The man on the right then looks like he's standing in front of the sedan. And look here at the same car-shaped boulder. It was odd, but the closer I walked to the boulders that day, the more I wanted to stay at a distance. Years before this happened, a kayaker friend told me that it was people on inner tubes who took the biggest risks, because, he said, they put into water they don't know. When I began this story, I said I didn't know the man who drowned, and that was true, but that's not the whole truth. I knew him as a boy. He was my cousin's son. The news accounts reported the man's name as James Robert, but we knew him as J.R. My clearest recollection of him is from when my mother cared for him in our house. He was there only a few days, and I remember him standing in his crib with that wide-eyed, watch-everything look that children that age have. I saw him only a few times after those early years, and only once after he'd married and become a father. From the Lake County Sheriff, a reply to my email stated that sadly, no. They never did retrieve the body. At this point in my life, like many of us, I know a few things about grief. And I like the conversation Roger Rosenblatt quotes in his book, Kayak Morning. "You have to understand," she told him, "grief lasts forever. Grief comes to you all at once, so you think it will be over all at once, but it is your guest for a lifetime." He asked, "How should I treat this guest, this unwelcome, uninvited guest?" "Think of the one who sent it to you," she said.